for this webinar that we're going to discuss and hopefully arrive at a conclusion is packaging needs a supply chain pain reliever. It's a big problem at the moment. Supply chains around the world in multiple industries are under huge stress, and packaging needs a solution there. Is digital inkjet technology the silver bullet? By that we mean, is digital technology going to come to the rescue for the packaging industry? So before we get on to the meat of that discussion, I'm going to introduce the gentleman I have with me today. It's Dave Gray from Rico Europe. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Marcus.
And Richard Darling from Rico Europe, and both of which are here today as experts within the industrial print business. So welcome, Richard, as well.
I wouldn't say experts, we've just been doing it a long time.
That makes you an expert, doesn't it?
Okay.
I want to start by, because I think it's important to us to understand a little bit about you both. So, Dave, give us a little bit of a background, your background in the industry and how you've seen things change and so
on. I'm in my 48th year in the print industry. I started off as a hot metal comp, and for 48 years I've been putting ink on things. Hasn't really changed, except the technology to put the ink on has changed a little bit. I've been lucky enough to have been swept along by the changes and kept my head above water. And these days, my role is predominantly supporting people who want to do the migration from analog to digital, partly because I'm one of the few people that can remember the analog. And fortunately, I'm not too old to understand the digital.
Yeah.
So that role of analog to digital migration manager.
Yeah, so you've kind of worked on different projects throughout the years where it's migrated in different industries. So you've seen patterns, I'm assuming.
Made all sorts of mistakes, and it's almost a consultancy role these days, actually helping people to avoid those mistakes and make new ones instead.
Okay, brilliant. Richard, a little bit about your background.
I do all of what he said, but better. Including not since the turn of the century, the last century, the 20th century, that is. But I haven't done it for as long. Didn't start from the same position, but I've been involved in print technology for more than 20 years and applying that to new things, particularly in the industrial field. So it is all about that. And I've one of the things I've done better is making more spectacular mistakes as well through life as well. And you learn from those, and that's what makes experts. So hopefully some of our mistakes we can help other people to avoid. Maybe not, but there are certainly. I think we're both focused, Dave. I think you'd agree on applying technology to solve issues
when it's appropriate.
That necessarily involves identifying the issues. Yeah,
the right technology for the problem at hand, as it were. Obviously, today's about packaging, and since I've been involved with the Inkjet community, people have talked about packaging. It's a fundamental question, really. I'm going to start with, why has packaging created such a significant amount of interest for the Inkjet community? Why is packaging so important?
Because it's so big. It represents a very attractive target to people who make machines and people who make ink. Simple as that. It's not a low-hanging fruit by any means, but it's attractive fruit. And I think your question is a typical one. Why is it attractive to the inkjet print industry? Doesn't mean it's attractive to the people in the packaging industry at all. And part of...
But it doesn't mean that inkjet is attractive to the packaging industry.
No. Yeah. No, they want to know about it. Because they've got a system that works or has worked, and it's only in recent years that concept of being fit for purpose has been challenged quite robustly. And our role is introducing alternatives and for the packaging industry to evaluate them alongside what they've already got and to decide what's best for them. But we know what's best for us. We sell inkjet technology. So what's best for us is the whole industry switching over. That doesn't mean it's the best thing for the packaging industry.
Right. That's an interesting view. So you think it's not necessarily a replacement technology and it's not the answer to everything, but could be the answer to some of the things. So that's interesting. So Richard,
it's relevant sometimes.
It's relevant sometimes. Richard, would you agree with that? Is that, why is packaging?
Yeah, I would. I think the question you asked was why is it why has it attracted the attention of the digital print world, and that includes other technologies as well as inkjet.
Yeah.
It is big, but it's also there's a changeover. So there was a lot of printing of billboards. There's a lot of printing of newspapers in the past and magazines, and they're all forms of communication, even documents. They're forms of communication which have diminished in their importance over the years. And the last packaging is actually a communication medium. And I think it was, I forget the name, but it was somebody in Coca-Cola, the chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola, who said that it's the most valuable advertising real estate, the space on the pack. It is people decide at point of purchase. They don't decide by an advert in a newspaper or a magazine or something, usually for most of the stuff that's packaged. So it's the last bastion of hard copy print and for communication. That's why it's attractive. And then the nature of communication has changed over time, and it plays to some of the strengths of digital. So digital, recognizing that it plays to some of those strengths, like late stage configuration, small lot size, or even customization, that type of thing. It can be done in the same process without the sort of traditional setup things. So it's in that area. So there's somewhere a blend of what digital printing can offer on the one hand, and on the other hand, what the packaging industry needs. It's not the only thing. So I'd agree with you, Dave.
I have this view that packaging is like many industries, but perhaps more so in the sense it's got a slight sort of contradiction in terms where it's fast moving on the one hand, but the manufacturing models that packaging follows is very entrenched and therefore inflexible and difficult to penetrate through new technology. Would that be fair?
It's
That's a really good point, Marcus. Yeah.
You carry on.
It's actually
you're an expert more than we are.
It's actually the status quo has been perfectly fine for normal times. And if you're chasing efficiencies, then producing centrally in almost continuous production, in some cases continuous production, and then millions the same, and you've got plans that are reliable because predictable consumer behaviors will come into it, then you can carry on doing what you're doing really efficiently using traditional means. And it is entrenched, and it's looking at the pennies, the fractions of pennies of cost. And everything is driven by that. That's the entrenched paradigm. When the demand for a product, any product, becomes unpredictable, or the pattern of behavior is all over the place, and the trend is even unpredictable, then you can't be entrenched. Otherwise, you're allowing some of that inefficiency to the efficiency diminishes. So just recently, we've had a bit of a big shock globally. Some of those patterns have become unpredictable, and that's actually highlighted that there's no agility in the system. So now there's probably more openness to new methods to change the way things have been and introduce new things. So that's the opening.
Yeah. Dave, did you want to expand on that? Thank you, Richard.
No, it is. I think what's happened is there's been a slow, gradual change in the way everything's done, including packaging and packaging printing. And we've also seen the main players in that market from supply side, so the hardware manufacturers looking at digital because they've had to. It's happened in all the other industries. Everybody's looking at, can I add a thingy on top of my analog press? Those companies still want to bash metal. They still want to produce presses. And if the world goes digital without them, they've lost their company. They've lost their reason to exist. So they're almost being forced into embracing it. And we've seen some interesting partnerships emerging between analog press manufacturers and digital add-ons. And we've also seen some digital startups or new to a sector, to an application. Packaging, just as every other market, the end user, the end consumer, the person who takes the product off the shelf, he has no interest in how the packaging was produced. He doesn't care whether it's printed litho or gravure or flexo, or digital or a room full of people with felt tip pens. It doesn't care. It's about, does it protect the product and does it communicate the message that was required? Marketing is one of those messages, advertising, and the other is information. It could be cooking instructions, it could be safety instructions, and things like that. But the packaging is not what you're buying. When you buy a packet of something in the supermarket, you're actually only buying the contents. The packaging is a disposable. In fact, a lot of the time you resent the packaging, especially around Christmas and other festive periods. You look at the quality of the packaging and the amount of packaging, and it's waste because it's all going straight into the bin, hopefully a recycling bin, but it's all going straight into the bin. And it is not the product is inside it. So from the manufacturer's point of view, the packaging is a necessary evil. Doesn't really want to think about it. No producer of product would ever think of themselves as a packaging company. They're a producer of the content. And then on the back of that, you've got other pressures. So the anti-plastic lobby, anti-plastic for the sake of it. It's not because there is necessarily a better, or environmentally there may be a better alternative, but it may not protect as well. It may not be as good in terms of economic performance. It may be more expensive as a packaging medium. It may not be good at holding the printed message. It might not be able to hold the fine type or whatever it is, but it's not, people are adopting an alternative to plastic because it's better. They're dumping plastic as part of the anti-plastic lobby. And it's, I'll offend somebody here, I know, but I say it's a bit like meat-free sausages. They don't taste any better than meaty sausages. They're more expensive. But, you know, the shelf presence is increasing. More people are buying it, not because they prefer them, but because actually they don't want the meat. I think there's a lot of things are going on in the package industry. So you've got all these changes, A, about the packaging material, B, about the stability of the market, the reliability, the predictability, as Richard said. And people are having to become more agile. They're having to respond to change. And although we've had a global shock, and hopefully it will settle down to a new norm, what it has shown people is that their supply chains are vulnerable. And that includes supply chains of packaging. So the concept of being able to produce smaller quantities of packaging closer to where the product is manufactured has become attractive. That plays into the hands of digital and away from the big centralized analog presses. Everything's up for grabs again. We talked about this post-COVID Klondike. You know, the concept of change is not as scary as it used to be. We've had change forced upon all of us. We've had to change. The question is now we've got, I say used to change, but used to the concept of changes. People are more willing to explore. We're seeing that. People are actually entering discussions saying, I don't think I need to change. What I've got works, but what else is there? What are the alternatives? What may not be right now, but 5 years, 10 years down the road, which direction is it going? What are my competitors doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's opened people's minds to different ways of doing things that were perhaps more entrenched previously. You've really touched on it already, so thanks for that, Dave. That's supply chain problems. Give some examples of these problems and what caused them. Obviously, COVID's the overarching issue, but it seems to be a huge amount of knock-on impacts of different things at different times. What are these supply chain problems, Richard?
Well, it's the unpredictability of behaviours, purchasing behaviours, I think. There's been a gradual change. I think you mentioned it, Dave, that there's been this gradual change where people have become more fickle. They become more responsive to more tailored messaging. So I sort of characterize it as North Korea to Colorado, or Portland, Oregon, which is where everything's about the individual in the current frame, and that's with younger generations in particular, but it's actually a general movement. And whereas we all accepted in the past decades, millions the same, everything could be the same, doesn't matter. Now there are things around brand recognition which have to stay constant, but appeal to purchase has to be more tailored to individual, or at least seem so. That's the sort of gradual glacial sort of pace of change, or trend of change. And then the COVID environment has actually changed it again on another level. It's another overlay of change, because a lot of the buying patterns have become like panic buying in some places, in some things. But there's also behaviors, fundamental behaviors about whether to have this or that, or to buy this much or that much, or to economize and not have that. There's all sorts of erratic behaviors. All of those things need a leveling up of agility. And the one thing that many of the supply chains don't have is agility. There's also geopolitical things like long supply chains from China. If you're in North America and you're importing from China, then over the last 5 years, there's been sort of some frictions. In some countries, import from certain other countries has been made difficult at a government level, political level. And that's not just applying duties, it's actually by applying friction at borders and things like that. So it's no longer, we used to talk about a small world, and it is a small world still in some sense, and it gets smaller. In other respects, the size of the world is actually patently obvious, because you can't get supply of stuff from one country to another, or one continent to another. So one of the supply chain problems is central and go to wherever in the world it's cheapest has risks, and those risks have been exposed recently, so that there has to be a consideration for local as an alternative, and what are the true costs of intercontinental sourcing. So and then if you go in that direction back to the more local, you're reversing a trend that's been going on for decades. So that's not going to happen overnight, but certain, and if it doesn't happen to the big brands, then we've got that influx of guerrilla small brands, the sort of the craft guys who start up small, and they appeal to individual consumers or groups of consumers or categories of consumers. And then easily a big brand can find that its market share is being whittled away by attack from the many others.
On the other side of it, the actual producers of the packaging, the printers, they've invested quite heavily in big machines, centralized print operations, and they only get the economies of scale if they keep that machine full. So they've got a vested interest in not decentralizing and holding on to the old paradigm. And it is a case of the new upstarts eroding those volumes to a point where the big centralized companies start to bleed. So are those big centralized companies, as their plant comes up for replacement, debating print local, decentralized, have small print hubs, have networked printing, so you can still have brand continuity across the globe, but produce in many more sites with smaller print factories, and deliver directly to customer, even have a just-in-time but next door to the manufacturer, rather than shipping halfway around the world. So those.
And I think there's some technologies, Dave. There's some technologies, Dave, that have come along that they sort of address some of the traditional oppositions to digital print and local. Like, for example, we can't match our brand color in this place and that place, and it can't be the same. Well, it can actually, with the software advances and also the printing equipment advances that have happened during the last few years. So they can. But I think more than that, there are bigger problems for these guys, the big brands and so on. There are bigger problems, and those problems, in the past, they might have actually come up with, you can look at the edge of that with a microscope, and it doesn't look as good on this as that, and then there's a delta of this, and they might have looked at those issues as big obstacles before, but really, it turns into in what's happened over the last couple of years, a struggle for survival, and it's not just now. It's in the reinvestment plans for the next few years. So whether people actually take the decision to go towards central or maintain their centralized production, or whether they actually take when they've reached the stage where their investments have paid back, and then they can make new investments in new structures and supply chains, then maybe they can actually do that in a different way. So we may see the effects of what's been witnessed during the last 2 or 3 years. We may see those effects in the 5 to 10 years coming.
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier.
If we're lucky.
The word agile is that flexibility, the ability to change and change quickly to respond to market changes. I mean, the whoever's packaging for Christmas at the moment must be absolutely horrified that suddenly it's down again worldwide. And we're going to be buying it on Amazon instead, where the actual packaging, the tactile effect of packaging has gone. We're just going to be looking at a flat 2D representation on screen and clicking it. And by the time we committed to buy, we've not actually ever seen the packaging or touched it, smelt it. There is a change in the role there. So it is, nobody could have foreseen that change. Welcome back, Marcus. We missed you.
I was there. I was just slight issues with Wi-Fi. So sorry, gentlemen. Yeah, and so you're touching it already when you mentioned Amazon. So what sectors have been hit hardest? So you've got corrugated flexible labels. You've got all these different folding cartons. Part of the gamut of the packaging. Well, which bits have been hit hardest? Which bits have benefited?
I think the food chain changed quite dramatically at the beginning of COVID. The catering packs stopped being sold and the individual packs started being purchased. I mean, toilet rolls and flour are the great classics. Flour, you could buy flour in 25 kilo sacks, but you couldn't get a 1 kilo sack for love or money. And the manufacturers of flour had plenty of flour. What they didn't have was packaging in 1 kilo size or access to packaging lines. Toilet rolls, if you wanted the jumbo roll to put in your corporate toilets, you could get those, but the individual rolls for home, just didn't happen. And that was a change because suddenly people weren't in the office. Nobody was using the office toilets. Everybody was using toilets at home, and everybody was baking bread at home. They weren't going out to the bakers. So the bakers weren't buying the sacks of flour and individuals were buying individual kilos of flour. So that was a change in packaging size, even though the contents hadn't changed at all. So that was a total mismatch, and there was a huge lag in the packaging industry being able to respond to that.
I could say it's if it's actually Marcus, if it's about impact, who's been knocked by this. I think corrugated would have to say that it's actually had a really positive knock, because more of what we buy is actually in and out of shipper, and the demand for corrugated board has gone through the roof. To such an extent, there's a shortage, and then there's also a shortage in the recycling chain. Or there's too much clogged up in the recycling chain so that it can't come through fast enough. So that I suppose if you were you're making money with corrugated board, you would be quite pleased. But I think that could be temporary, because really that's more packaging material for the same consumption. So are we going to the e-tailer direction, or are we going to go back afterwards to more retail? I'm not sure. I don't think anybody's sure.
I think for food,
I think
used to home deliveries now. They've adopted. They had to during the worst the times. But it's going to be a bit of a spring back, because that model relies on somebody being at home to accept delivery of it, and start to return to the office. You're in the office today, Richard. It's that's a general movement back to the office. You're not at home to receive your Amazon delivery now. So alongside that,
look what happens if I cough. If I cough just now, then the whole office is going to exit.
Yes. But it does mean that there's we move, certainly in the UK, we're moving towards a more European model of having post boxes, drop boxes. We've always benefited from having delivery to doorstep. That's not going to function when people go back to work. So it'll be delivery to a drop box at some point. But I don't think we're ever going to go back to doing the concept of every Saturday is spent entirely retail therapy, collecting everything you need for the following week.
No, we've learned buying's changed, doesn't it? How we buy has changed.
How we buy and what we buy.
I was at a decanter
and our own recycling box.
Yeah.
Look at what you put out every week in recycling. There's now much more brown board in output, and most of it's got a smiling face on it. And it is a change, and whether that's the same brown board that the supermarkets were previously collecting and recycling. But I know that my recycling box now is predominantly brown board from incoming parcels.
Yeah.
Never had before.
And then I heard that led to a shortage as well, didn't it? Of corrugated and
yeah.
Yeah, so there's all these sort of changes. And that brings me on to the next question, really. In terms of consumer change, you've kind of touched on it. One of the things I thought was quite interesting is more brand promiscuity and people sort of trying different things out, perhaps that they never previously had. Is that's likely to retain its kind of importance going forward? And I guess buying, like you just intimated, the way we buy has changed. We're spending more time online. I was at Ducati showroom at the weekend. They said exactly that. People are buying online now, collecting, and things are getting delivered. They're not even coming to the showroom. Obviously, when you're buying print technology, that isn't quite the same, is it? And obviously, if you're running a packaging outfit, it isn't quite the same. But that is going to stay with us, isn't it? Those consumer changes that have been a result of lockdown, in essence. Would you agree? And supply chain difficulties.
I think we're well prepared to accept alternatives. In the beginning, we took our toilet rolls from whoever we could get. We didn't care about the brand. We didn't care about the performance. Actually, really, we didn't even care about price. So it was a great opportunity for profiteering from some people. And we didn't care about which store we got them from, or whether it was delivered, or whether it was you crept out in the middle of the night to a store that had it and bought it that way. Now that we've grown accustomed to trying different brands and different brands of supply and different sources, why not? Everything's up for grabs. This is the post-COVID Klondike. Brand loyalty, be it the product or the retail source, has gone. And I think the big names, either the supermarkets or the brand owners, have now got to compete to recover the loyalty they had before. And it's an opportunity to poach customers from other brands. So, and this is where packaging really can step in. Richard pointed out that the point of purchase, that how it sits on the shelf, the impact on that buying signal is everything. And the ability to change as circumstances change and react to how your competitors are reacting. It's that responsiveness that you can't have packaging that's commissioned 6 weeks in advance and hope that you're going to actually track public demand and public mood.
6 weeks. 6 weeks. I think I've heard months and months and months, much more than 6 weeks in some cases, and I think that's the agility that I'm talking about. Consumers are fickle. Consumers will do what consumers want, and it's no longer a body of consumers. It's actually individuals, and there are many individuals who will select what they buy according to. I mean, it's a movement to select seasonal things. It's things that fit with philosophies, whether it's actually got this or that or the other inside it, or whether it hasn't, whether it's from made in this country or that country. They're looking at the source. They're looking at how local it is. They're looking at whether it's good for their local economy. They're looking at as if they want to know if they can relate to it. So this kind of, I'd like to think that branding has a role to play because it can identify some of those values and things, and it can assure us. But if it goes to no brand, that can have some difficulties. And the branding is by the consumer. I think consumers have actually looked for different brands, which are more what they want. Take craft beer is an example where branding is hugely important to craft beer. But we've had the mass brands for so long, and the only thing that the mass brands can do with their structures is to try and join in with the craft beer movement by buying into it. That's expensive for them to do, and as soon as you've bought one, then another one can pop up. So it's not sustainable as a strategy. That's a big brand thing, and it's also back in those differences. People are going to choose to maybe. Instead of going out socializing with alcohol products, then maybe they've got used to not going out so much because we haven't been allowed for such a long time. So there are momentary consumer pressures and consumer changes, and there's the general trend. And I'd say younger people are actually more in tune with, they want to be in tune with sources and a match to their own philosophies rather than just accepting what's gone before for generations. And you can see that in everything from deterioration of fizzy drinks to vegetarian sausages and things. So there's now a demand for things that fit with philosophy. communication on pack is even more important now than it ever has been, and it always has been important. And that's not to design an outer pack that contains a bulk buy opportunity, which it takes up a lot of consumer attention in the window of their vision. But it's actually got to be a bit more subtle than that. It's got to be something that appeals to them when they actually look at it closely. So I think communication on pack has to respond to these changes in consumer behaviours. Some of them driven by the last couple of years, and some of them just glacial change over many years, and set to continue. So we'll see how it turns out.
You sort of mentioned consumer change with younger people's behaviour and so on. Social change has accelerated during the period of. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that could impact packaging as well, right? Social change. I mean, now on the one hand, sustainability is a huge, massive thing we won't necessarily talk about, but social change in terms of the issues of, you know, certain brands suddenly becoming toxic and association to them and so on. I don't know if you can go into that.
The risks of being a big brand are actually they're actually quite considerable, and I think there is some. We're talking about brands as if we know what we're talking about, but there are brand experts and those demographic social change experts that are in the big brands and some of the little ones as well, and that really is a science in itself to actually try and understand these things. But I think from the outside and as people who can provide the means for applying messaging to the outside of packages. Or the inside of packages for that matter, we can only say that there is a need for versatility and agility with short time from concept to fulfillment in the printed messaging that goes onto packs, and that is what we're really here for. And the silver bullet thing, I think that's only one part of it. Because there are many other challenges in packaging, but it can be a significant part of it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that you are a big brand, Harrogate Water, big brand, well respected. How quickly can you get your Yorkshire Cricket Club logo off of your packaging? You know, that's got to happen overnight. And if you've got packaging booked and in supply chain for the coming weeks and months, that's bad news. You've now got product that is tainted. You need to be able to respond that quickly to a change in external factors, totally out of your control. You, from a commercial point of view, overnight, you need to change your packaging. I think it's been a great opportunity, and will continue to be for the label industry, that we've seen more products coming to market, which are, when you study them, actually white box with label applied, or white can with label applied for the craft beer. Label has that ability to respond quicker and in smaller print runs, setting up the tooling for a much larger packaging. So if labeling don't make a killing during this, perhaps a really inappropriate words, during this crisis, that it's an opportunity they've missed. But you now look at how much of the label industry has gone digital previously, and that stimulus for going more so. It brings back, labelling has for the last 10 years really shown its ability to embrace digital, to become more just in time, to be more flexible, to be more responsive and cut those lead times down.
Yeah, I was at I am at a printing event, and VPress very cleverly just printed off a label with my name on it, which I think is really cool. And it just sort of builds on what you're saying there. You can do these things, it's possible. With the right software and thinking and so on, and respond very quickly. And the issue of sponsorship and social change, I hadn't anticipated being in this discussion, but it is a great example. If you've got a very long tail of manufacturing, to change things takes time. And like you say, things can become tainted and it's damaging, isn't it? So it's an interesting point that the consumer is, actually, I also think there's been a rebalance, right? Consumers become even more powerful.
Marcus, that beer that you have that has a label with your name on it. I mean, it's a fairly simple thing to relate to you, but it kind of makes you feel a little more connected to it as a product. because it has name on it. It's the same beer as if it's had no label at all. But it
Exactly.
makes you feel a bit more connected to it. Now, the cost of putting that label on, I can bet, if it was done at a show, it's going to be quite expensive by comparison with a standard label.
Yeah.
However, the value it adds is also measurable. So I think that's another thing that the packaging industry have to consider, and also the inkjet industry. It's not all about cost; it's about value.
Very good.
I think we willingly get dragged into many more total of ownership conversations, and it's relatively easy to list all the tangible costs of materials and labor and investment. And it's when it comes to the intangibles of what's the value of speeding up shortening your supply chain, of reducing your waste. And we regularly start with the value, and the customer talks himself into a much better position because he's got a real handle on where all the leakage is in his present system, where is all the wastage. And we get quite pleasantly surprised that how competitive investing in a new digital system, when you've already got perhaps an analog system that's fully amortized, so you're only running at marginal cost, you're only maintenance and consumables, but nevertheless, the advantages outweigh any marginal cost increase in a pure production sense. And that's what we encourage people now to engage with us is let's sit down, let's look and see if there is a financial benefit, net financial benefit. So there will always be a cost to going digital, but is there other factors which, when you really quantify them, stack up and offset that increase in cost? And we're having those conversations probably more so than we are about the quality. The quality is almost a given.
Quite holistic things. It's looking end to end holistically, and does you said about net difference? There'll be an investment cost from changing from one process to another, and maybe it's appropriate to put that in plant rather than in a third party contractor, a converter or something. So there's all sorts of discussions around that. Those discussions in previous times, the key decision makers has to try and prove a case for the status quo. Now they're having to look in detail to prove a case for investment in new. That's quite a. We'll wait and see how that plays out in the coming years. But I think that there's more of an appetite for change now.
I think the old paradigm: if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Recent events have shown it's broken, and it's
under the strain.
How do you fix it? Yeah. How do you fix it? Do you try and repair what you've got, or do you contemplate replacing or upgrading or putting something in parallel with it even?
My concern, Dave, is that if you actually simply try to replace what exists already in the way that it's done with something that's digital that does the same thing in the same place, you don't always release the benefits that are available. And I guess sound like an old seasoned guy here, but when you've seen so many of those where there have been missed opportunities by providing a format of, let's say, digital implementation, which just doesn't quite deliver what it could if it were done differently. And that's what we referred to at the beginning about some of those mistakes that we've been part of. You learn from those things, and if you actually look at that, there's an opportunity now to actually revisit how things are done, where they're done, and by what means. So it's simply putting ink on stuff to communicate, but how do you do it? It doesn't need to be done as it has been done before.
No.
Still be using letterpress.
Yeah. Yeah. Any news or examples you've seen where inkjet's actually been used differently or starting to be used differently over the past sort of year within packaging and labels, or any sort of news that you may want to share about some of the development? Because it does seem that there's a coalescence of problems on the supply chain and consumer change on the other side, creating a sort of perfect storm, if you like, for digital technology and maybe inkjet in particular. Are there any examples you could share or any news of developments?
I think the demand side has been the customer, the manufacturer of the product who needs some packaging to put it in, got caught short. Overnight, his supply chain is under stress, perhaps even stopped. And so he's been running around. So immediate is, can I get the same product locally? Can I get it quicker? So there's been a lot of onshoring. And I think a lot of that is going to remain, the concept of onshoring, where for years we've been exporting the production of it. But then there has been a realization that too many packaging buyers have not kept themselves up to date with alternatives. And that is partly their fault, and it's partly the existing digital providers have not done a great job of marketing themselves to these companies. So I think what people are begging for now, and you're at an exhibition now, there's another one in Olympian, people are here today, the opportunity to match packaging buyers with packaging producers and have intelligent conversations. The reason I say intelligent conversations, it's not about a producer saying, I've got this technology, I need to try and sell it to you. It is about talking long-term relationships with companies and saying, what is it you're really trying to do? What are your needs? And let's look at an assortment of packaging solutions that will deliver what you actually want. Most producers of product don't care about the technology. That's the responsibility of the packaging manufacturer. What he's got to do is present a portfolio of options to these companies. And I've always cringed at printers who put all their plant list on their website. Who cares? Selling equipment, that's the likes of our job. That's Richard and I are supposed to be doing things like that. But the printer is selling a product, and it is about making it fit for purpose, right place, right time, right price for the purchaser of packaging, so that he can put his product straight into it without waste, without delay, and get it out to market efficiently. Those conversations haven't taken place often enough in the past. And it is now going to be, well, I think during the worst crisis, it was speed dating. Everybody was just running around trying to get whatever they could get from whatever technology. That's meant that a lot of people have experienced digital for the first time. Not saying their experiences have always been good, but a lot of people are now saying, you know what, as I start to think about what the new normal will be, what my new standard operating procedure will be, I've got to at least evaluate digital as part of that, or evaluate suppliers of digital print in that solution. And couple that changes in mood towards types of packaging as well. And either not wanting to see plastic in that supply chain or the recyclability of it, that presents its own challenges in printing. I think there's a lot of conversations going on. And if anybody on this call isn't party to those conversations, wake up. You've got to engage in this, because this solution will require everybody to talk openly and honestly about what their needs are or what they're able to supply.
Well, you brilliantly preempted my question about advice to people looking to integrate Inkjet, whether they're an OEM or a converter. So you've started that process. Any sort of particular advice you might give, building on what Dave said there, Richard?
Well, just rounding off with it, I think there are a whole bunch of changes in materials for the sustainability angle. There's trying to reduce from bottles to pouches, which is from hard to flexible materials, to from porous to non-porous where possible, from co-laminate material to single materials. There's all sorts of change in materials there. And with supply chains, there comes opportunity. You don't have to have as much packaging to bring something from a local source to a market compared to long distance supply chains. So all of that goes on. And then during this time, I think your question was about what sort of machines, what sort of developments are coming along. There are developments in process. I think one of the things I've noticed is, and they take a lot of time and they're within non-disclosure agreements, but there was one time you could talk to the analog guys, and I've always felt that the analog guys, whether it's Flexo, Gravure, or whatever, they know a market or an industry very well, and they're not the enemy. They will always do a job, and you have to blend with those people. But if you actually went to talk about digital with some of those guys, then at times in the past they've actually been sort of put garlic out and a cross at the door to keep the digital enemy away.
Yeah.
Now they're actually proactively chasing a digital element to what they do already, and I think that's a really good opportunity. So I think some good for label, for example, or flexible packaging. You can put down an image with some analog, and then you can put down some digital content. It can be graphic content, or it can be just black, or it can be whatever. It can be some embellishment. But that blend of technologies is now more on the agenda than it ever has been. And I think that's really good. And there are some developments for new packaging formats, that take into account this. It's not necessarily going as fast, and it's local. So therefore, you match it to a line that serves a market rather than something that serves the whole world. So not chasing that 300 meters a minute and breakneck speeds and all the stuff that's been done in one place before. And that applies to textile printing, but it also applies to packaging. So there's now an openness to revisiting the whole specification. And that leads to the answer to your last question, which was about advice. I would say that converters should be thinking about whether they can actually manage services in plant with a brand, because that helps that agility, time to respond type of thing. It reduces the time to respond. So the Harrogate water example, where you actually need to take an association off the branding, you can take that off in an instant if you're managing it in plant. If you're somewhere else in a different building in a different company, then it's not so easy. So to chase that agility, I think maybe converters should think of running in-plant services rather than doing them as they've always done them in the places they've always done them. I think brands will consider those things too. And I think formats of equipment, just make sure it meets the needs, because just doing what's done before, chasing the feeds and speeds, it just won't work necessarily as well as it might. It can work, but it won't be as good as it might. And on print quality, Dave, you said we're not talking so much on print quality these days because it's kind of assumed that whatever's out there is fit for purpose. Mm. There are still some people who like to look through microscopes and sort of compare quality, but I don't think as a consumer, I speak as a consumer, I don't care how it's printed. I don't care how good the print quality is. I don't want to see small text. I don't really notice the tonal gradients. Even if I am a professional in the print industry, I'm more interested in the connection of the message on the pack, which is exactly the point that you made with your beer bottle with your name on it. It's as simple as that. So it's the messaging that's more important than the counting the dots or something. There's a willingness to consider different formats.
Yeah, being open-minded and kind of accepting that, this is a solution that adds value and can solve some problems, but isn't really a replacement entirely to the existing way of doing things anyway. Is there any advice you want to finish on, Dave? When someone's thinking of inkjet, whether a converter or an OEM, and they know they've got to make some kind of investment and some kind of change, what should they do? What's some basic advice?
Nobody likes making investments. That's coming straight off your bottom line of your
pitch. Like buying stuff.
So nobody wants there. Mm-hmm. A nice buzz about buying something. We all enjoy that retail therapy buzz. Ultimately, from a commercial point of view, nobody wants to buy new equipment because it's straight off the bottom line. And that, let's not forget, that's why companies exist, to boost that bottom line. So spending is contrary to the prime objective. So going into it, not getting swept along by the enthusiasm of Inkjet or digital. Let's keep it simple. Digital. Obviously, we're biased towards Inkjet, but the whole digital concept, it is not a silver bullet. That's where you started. It is not going to solve everybody's problems. Oh, that it would. It would be lovely. But the reality is that in the right hands, in the right situation, it is better than what already is. In other cases, it's not fit for purpose. And we like to think that professionally we will tell people when it suits and when it doesn't. We're not out there to sell it regardless of whether it suits the customer or not. Partly that's the reason we've been in the industry as long as we had. If we were snake oil salesmen, we'd have been drummed out of town a long time ago. It is there's still a chance, yeah. But it is a case of now more than ever, buyers and sellers have to engage in sensible adult conversations.
Yeah.
And recognize each other. Both have to make profit. It's not a dirty word. It's the only reason for coming to work, to make a profit for the organization. And to look at it sensibly. And most of the digital vendors now, we've seen a great consolidation between machine builders, ink suppliers, so consumables and hardware. Again, there's a consolidation in the market between the two because the machine builders need the consumable manufacturers need the machine builders. So either there's got to be some very close ties between them. One cannot survive without the other, or they become under one corporate umbrella, one organization. So we've seen that consolidation. And it is for consumers of print to really sit down and spec out what is it they want from their packaging. What's it got to do? It's got physical characteristics. It's got legibility characteristics. It's got brand color, all of that. Put it down sensibly and then put it out on the table and see who is prepared to offer something that does that. And we just love having conversations with people. I mean, we're looking forward to being able to do it face to face. We're doing it virtually at the moment. And that makes it quite difficult. We've all found maintaining existing relationships over Zoom and Teams is possible. Creating new relationships is more difficult without being face to face. And that's where perhaps some of the exhibitions stepped in. It was the opportunity to meet people and start new relationships. But ultimately, you need those engagements to talk about what the options are. Digital is never going to be sold out of a catalogue. It will always be a bespoke solution, a one-on-one between somebody who wants to produce packaging or consume packaging and somebody who wants to make their living out of manufacturing packaging. And we offer our services as part of that. So I guess our role
I might differ with you on that, Dave. I think it has to actually standardize, and it has to sort of gather around standards, because otherwise it'll never be efficient, and never be perceived to be efficient. If everything's customized, then some of us make compromises in what we have because we can't afford a hand-built Aston Martin.
I think
so we have to make compromises. And
so if we can
there's something that's true. That's true, Dave. But I think there's something here. You mentioned fit for purpose, and I think there's too many people who actually look at fit for purpose with some sort of dreaminess. They look at the cleverness, and we're all part of the techie community too, to a fault. So if we look at the higher resolutions and the print quality and all of that, and we just get obsessed with it, we all want good print quality. We all don't want to notice the flaws. We don't want to notice how it's printed. But if we get obsessed with that, ease back on that. Say what's fit for purpose, what will actually suit what we're trying to do. And I think this is about advice. Look at the fit for purpose of the process, the means by which you achieve that fit for purpose image. And there are many processes that deliver the best possible image, which are not fit for purpose as a process. And particularly if we're actually saying some of these print processes will be done by non-printers, traditionally non-printers, so bringing it in-house, for example, as has happened in office printing and copying and so on. It comes in-house because it becomes less specialist. If it becomes less specialist and non-printers are doing it, it has to be more robust as a process. So having sort of these knife edge or bleeding edge systems that are so clever that it hurts, I don't think that's a good way for this industry to address packaging requirements. So fit for purpose on the image and fit for purpose on the process.
So listen, thanks so much for joining us, guys. The technical challenges haven't been kind to us today, but very interesting conversations, some useful advice at the end. I think strategic, collaborative, flexible, lots of words that I think open-minded, and really sort of, I guess, looking at the problems and starting at what you believe the right problem is to solve with this technology. It's not a silver bullet, but with the right mindset, perhaps it could be. So I'm going to finish there. So thank you for joining us, gentlemen.